With that, I think we have a few minutes available actually for a general Q&A. And I do want to kind of bring up one broad question before we get to some of the open questions that are still there. Marco had raised a great point about sustainability, about these use case driven views of repackaging data from various repositories as knowledge portals to kind of make it less intimidating. I don't know if anyone wants to address it, or Lara, this was kind of off of your presentation. Do you want to kind of speak to the sustainability a little bit on that?
Sure, absolutely. Sustainability is always a big problem and a big question, in particular when we're talking about building data repositories using sort of traditional grant-based funding mechanisms. I think that my observation has been, here in the US, that the NIH has been taking great strides towards addressing the funding portion of sustainability for long-term data storage. The software side is another question. And so our experience has been taking the time to evaluate the necessary lifespan of the software and the specific portals that we're building, which are entry points into existing repositories, and then planning around that. But I'd be very curious about others' experience with this who are running repositories.
Would anyone else like to comment on sustainability? I think this is an important factor from our perspective, and as Lara just mentioned, because you want the data to live beyond the life of that award or the grant for it to be kind of reusable for the longer period of time. So John, I see you're on, and do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I have two comments. One is I think funders have a unique role because funding happens within a distinct time range, right? There is a beginning of a grant and end of a grant, whereas data stewardship is something that goes on for decades or for forever. And those two ideas, or constraints or ideas, are not aligned. And especially when it comes into institutions and the way that institutions manage grants, the idea of being able to pay for the long-term storage and stewardship of data outputs beyond the duration of a grant is something that institutions struggle with. And so some clarity from funders, especially federal or government funders, around that specific parameter would definitely help all repositories as they look towards how to become more sustainable, because it would allow them to tap into funding that comes specifically from the grants that are awarded to researchers. And then another observation about sustainability is just that very often we get in conversations about quote unquote sustainability when we talk about nonprofit or institutional repositories, just wondering like, how will they pay their bills? But I think one thing that I think it's important to remember is that the ICPSR and others, and like, I know the Dryad, nonprofit repositories that have been around for a very long time and have been able to be sustained and have a sustainability plan. And so I think there's something here that we need to just kind of make sure that we have the same type of vocabulary when we talk about same type of criteria that we have when we talk about commercial and non-commercial repositories, that sustainability is not something that's just needed for us to evaluate when it comes to nonprofit or community-based approaches.
Absolutely. Thanks very much for that. And I think this is an open question to the audience. And in terms of thinking about innovative approaches of what does sustainability really mean, and sharing that with a larger community of how each of you are addressing this in your own domains and worlds, I think that everyone would benefit from. I do want to touch on one other question, then we can come back to this question that I see over there that I think is quite popular. And this is kind of as a result of your presentation, Sandra, about, you have record level annotations over here. Do you also have the same data in a machine readable format? Because I think machine readability of data is also a hot topic these days in terms of how to kind of make it useful and usable.
Yeah, so I would say in short that yes, I believe that we do have the data in machine readable format. We are able to export our metadata in a lot of different formats. I unfortunately can't say a lot more than that. I would have to refer you to our metadata librarians to kind of do this work. So if you send me an email, Marco, I'd be happy to connect you with the right folks.
Great. And again, this is just an open call to people who have ideas, you want to share it. Please feel free to email datascience@nih.gov or tweet it with the hashtag NIH Data. So we're all kind of sharing our ideas and thoughts over here as we move forward. So would anybody else like to comment on any of the questions that you've heard? I just want to kind of open the floor for the next minute or two. For those who
I was just gonna respond to that same question, which is that we did a survey at the University of California about how researchers are using data from data repositories. And it kind of speaks to this idea of, maybe Laura brought this up as well, which is that while we are all interested in creating infrastructure for data readability, machine readability and machine actionability, we want to have computational environments for the data repositories themselves to actually be useful in real time. What we found from our survey is that researchers still almost 100% want to download the data locally, have a local copy, and manage it themselves and feel like they have ownership over it. And so there's not only this, like, the tools and technology that need to change to be more robust, but there's a culture change that really needs to change for all of these repositories to actually, truly have some value with these new features.
Absolutely. And I think the culture change, we all kind of recognize that it's kind of slow and it is gradual over time, but it would be fascinating to know what is that one transformational thing that could maybe, bring about that culture change kind of overnight. And that wouldn't that be kind of the ideal world where we want to get to? So any other parting thoughts or comments from our panelists in the UK? There you go.
Yeah,
Carol.
I just wanted to follow up John's point there that the reason people download things is because they don't trust that it'll still be there. And so it's tied with the sustainability issue that we've all been bitten by depositing data in repositories that then disappeared because they didn't actually get any sustained funding. They didn't have an exit strategy. So thank goodness for Zenodo, because our ultimate exit strategy is just to dump everything in Zenodo, and hurrah for the particle physicists. But we really ought to get our house in order a bit better. And I just wanted to point out that the Global Biodata Coalition is at least trying to do that through a kind of collective action.
Thank you, Carol, for calling that out. Mark, do you have any?
Yeah, I'm aware we're very short on time. I just wanted to echo these points and say, I think there's two cultural changes, and we've done a great job over the last couple of decades on getting the first one going, which is researchers making their data available in some way. The second thing about how we're going to reuse this going forward and how we encourage people to build on top of the research that's gone before is either going to be the second wave of the big cultural shift that will take a whole long time and a lot of thinking about, or the robots are going to sort it for us. But in order for that to happen, we still need to be preparing the data in a way that is human and machine readable, so that at least there is a way in which people, the AI and the ML can get on top of it.
Fantastic. Thank you again for all the insights and for an outstanding session. And we have, I think, 30 seconds to go. And with that, we can close the session. Bye-bye, everyone.